Continuing our journey through Leo season, we're now entering in through gate number 4, mental solutions. This is going to bring us up into the Ajna in your human design chart and bring us through the shadow of intolerance, the learning lesson of reasons, looking at the gift of understanding, and moving towards the highest light attribute, the Sudi of forgiveness. When we look at it through the teachings of the I Ching, which is the book of changes, Gate 4 mental solutions is all about the pursuit of answers. And it really is going to teach us that admitting inexperience with any problem leads to the possibility of finding the right solution for it. We're going to start then up in the Ajna Center. And in your human design chart, you're going to want to see if you have that colored in, if it is defined in your chart, or if you have it white, meaning that it's undefined. And the reason for that is if you are undefined up in that Ajna Center, you are not designed to retain information. But you are picking up on the mental pressure of the collective field. And one of the not self themes for that is then trying to prove that you have the answers or feeling a lot of anxiety of having to come up with an answer. If you have that colored in on your chart, you have a consistent way of thinking, processing, and organizing your information. And at the same time, even though you have a set system, we want to really look at that to see if you can move beyond what you have created as your own mental framework. So, mental solutions is going to teach us about the power of our mind, but it's really designed to bring us into that third eye awareness, to get us to go deeper into the self, to move beyond the construction that we have created for ourselves, and to really help us to open up to the unknown, to be okay with not knowing the answers and to seek a higher wisdom in that. We're going to be entering into the fear of chaos. And a lot of us have a desire to want to organize, to control life, to have a sense of safety and security through predictability, through feeling like you know what's going to happen next. And that can be as easy as creating a to-do list or a set structure, or just kind of feeling like you have all your ducks in a row, so to speak. And when life throws us a curveball, which can happen quite often, things get very chaotic. And one of the ways that you can check in with yourself to see how you're affected by that is to notice your nervous system. Notice how your breathing pattern may change, your heart rate may change, your stress levels may change. And those are all indications of anxiety. We are in mental anxiety, and if there is a anxiety feeling within you around chaos or that inability to find order in life, or if you're anxious about giving and receiving answers, then that is just your body's way of saying that there's work for you to do in there to start really bringing in the higher gift aspects in this, which is really going to move us into a forward thinking brain, meaning tapping into a deeper third eye consciousness. For those of you that have gate number 4 circled in your chart, this here is a pressure to want to attempt to fix anything, anytime, anywhere, anyhow. So it really does come with that stimulation to want to dive in, to want to solve a problem. Very likely you have a good track record in being able to solve problems and an enjoyment that comes with being handed a challenge for you to figure out. A lot of times we might even create a problem in order to fix something. So that could be because there's a desire there to want to be wanted, a need to be needed, a desire to prove ourselves, or simply just being bored and wanting to stimulate some kind of action. There also may be times where it becomes completely overwhelming if you cannot figure something out. And when that comes in, it might create a lot of worry, a lot of tension, a lot of sleepless nights. So, we're going to talk about how to relax those parts of yourself to move beyond the entrapment then of the mind. It also may feel like you have an answer for everything. And I know for myself, having an undefined ajna, I went through a period of my life where I was almost proud of being able to find a solution to a problem if somebody had a question. And I would quickly get onto my phone, I would Google it, I would bring forward the answer, and I would almost have this energy of being that know-it-all or being like, oh, I can prove to you that I can find it. And even though it was helpful, it also came with a bit of an air of arrogance in there, if I'm to be completely honest in it. And the reason for that, I learned through my own human design, was because of that pressure to try to find an answer. And it took me a lot of practice to really step back and just to become aware that a lot of times people have questions or they're just sharing their thoughts, and it's not requiring you to go out to seek the answer for them. Or in our own maturity, it's really recognizing, is it our place to find the answer for somebody else? Because that takes away their self-empowerment to know how to seek the answers to their questions, if it even matters enough for them to go and explore that. So it's kind of funny to chuckle back sometimes at behavioral patterns that I'm sure we all go through at different points in time. And maybe even being able to recognize some anxiety you may have had about needing to recall information if that was difficult for you to do. And perhaps having a greater understanding that maybe you're not just designed to do that. If you're not designed to retain information, you probably have a set way of knowing where to find the answers to your questions. So it's really learning to discover who we are through our human design charts and accepting yourself for who you are. Moving back to having an answer for everything, when something comes so very quickly, a lot of times we get stuck in the same behavioral patterns. So we are giving the same answer for the same kind of question or the same kind of solution to the challenge, and we're not allowing ourselves to think from a different perspective or to try something new. So again, that is a way of really creating a set pattern that then robs you from the ability to be a lot more versatile or adaptable to the changes. So noticing if you tend to jump in too quickly, and maybe there's a need there to take a step back to question, is this the correct way for this situation? Is this mine to solve? And what is in there for the highest good? So we're going to learn that there is a difference between accumulating a lot of knowledge, which means learned material, and wisdom, tapping into that higher consciousness. We're here to seek to empower, not to be right. And this is also going to bring us into part of the channel of the logical thinker. So this is our gate number 4 and gate number 63 connection. It connects the head and the ajna together, which in its totality is our mind. So if you have this channel in your human design chart, you do have a defined head and ajna center, which is about 30% of the population. So it is rare. It is really somebody here who is designed to inspire others through providing the pressure to think. So it's really understanding that you may very well be ahead of the curve. You very likely have a lot of common sense. And because there's a lot of common sense, that's where we're going to discover that the shadow of intolerance kind of peeks its head in. Because if it's common sense to you, it can be really frustrating when somebody doesn't get it, they don't understand it, they don't see it, and it may feel like that is a really stupid question. But we're really learning in this course the power of our words, the power of our mindset, and understanding that what comes easy to one person, that is the gift that they bring to the rest of humanity. So when we learn to really channel in the power of grace and the power of patience, and we learn that we are all here to help one another to grow and evolve, we are really going to hone in on this one for the highest light aspect of forgiveness. And it's learning to forgive ourselves for calling ourselves names such as dumb or stupid or feeling all this pressure that we have to know something, and really coming into the grace of understanding that we really know only a tiny little bit of our world. There's so much more that we do not know. And that very thought can be quite scary because we're looking for self-assurance. We're looking for predictability. We've been taught to outsmart one another. We have raised ourselves in a system that almost puts a lot of emphasis on that university degree or that higher level of education. And that is then attributed to one's worth. So it's really challenging all of those different mindsets and belief systems. And yes, we want to develop common sense. We want to develop the rational thought, but we also want to expand beyond the mind to tap into greater wisdom. So the channel of the logical thinker is naturally going to draw itself energy from gate 63, which is the gate of doubt. This is naturally putting pressure on us to ask questions, to survey the environment, and to really kind of question, what doesn't feel right? So when somebody asks you something or somebody tells you something, it's that pressure to then go, yeah, I don't know about that. What if we did this approach? Or it's just asking more questions to clarify, where did you get your research? What do you feel about that? What is your experience with that? Sometimes people will go, well, what is your proof on that? Now we're going to learn that the third eye doesn't come with proof. You can't prove your intuition. You can't prove what comes through from that higher power. But you do have a strong sensation within your body that's just this indicator of, yeah, that feels right to me, or that doesn't feel right to me. So this is the pressure for us all at this time as it's opened up in the mandala wheel. If you're following along with the inner alchemy, or if you have this channel, this is a consistent theme for you, but really leaning into questioning yourself. Does this feel right? Is more information needed? What else can I observe from the environment around me? What other perspectives can I take on? Maybe putting yourself into different shoes, different points of view to see things from multiple perspectives, and really helping us to grow and evolve past having those blinders on or that sometimes narrow mindset. The channel of the logical thinker also naturally sees things in terms of cause and effect. And that is one of the laws of the universe. If this happens, that will happen. If I do that, this is the consequence for it, right? So there's always a cause and effect, and it might play out differently, but there's a very rationale that, if I put my finger in the light socket, I'm going to get zapped. If I touch the hot burner, I'm going to get burnt. If I say something rude to somebody else, I'm probably going to get some backlash. If I decide to jump off that cliff, I'm going to fall, right? So there's a very rational thought that comes with it. There is that heightened common sense that we talked about, and not everybody has that common sense. So it's really allowing yourself to be aware that just because it's easy for you, it doesn't mean that somebody else understands it. So there's also the ability in this channel to learn to recognize in another if they really do understand, or if you are needing to provide more clarity or to ask them questions to help them to understand the concepts a little bit better. This is also an area where we can get a lot of worry and doubt. And when you're not trusting yourself and your ability to think for yourself, rationalize for yourself, be in touch with your feelings, or feeling okay to ask questions, because some of us have been shut down with that ability to ask questions. And now that you are the adult, you got to reassure that child within you that it's safe to question and to maybe bring that voice back online into the forefront. So the more you learn to trust yourself, the more you're going to find your way to really rationalize what is happening and to relax the mind in order to tap into that higher wisdom. When we are plagued by the worry or doubt, and sometimes you get a bit of a headache that comes with that, you're stuck in this mental field, which means you're not getting any wisdom. You're just churning the same information, the same worry, the same doubt, the same emotions, the same facts, as we would call them, over and over and over again in the mind. So the mind is limited in its capacity to think. We have our own programs. We can get really hardwired to our programs, unwilling to change, unwilling to consider different things if it has been working for us. And it takes a lot of courage to literally start to forget everything that you've ever known in order to then discover true wisdom. And even just kind of hearing that and feeling that within your own body, you're going to notice how tightly you want to hold on to a certainty or a set identity and to admit to yourself that I just don't know. That can be powerful, a very powerful way to set yourself free. If you do tend to worry about a lot of people's issues or just, you're just plagued by worry of trying to figure out all the answers, really important to ask yourself, is this mine to fix? Because if it belongs to another, the energy that is spent towards worrying or trying to figure out why somebody's doing something, why they're behaving in a certain way, or how you can help them, that is disempowering their ability to help themselves. And you can use that energy to channel through surrounding them by trusting them, respecting them, asking them some questions, knowing for yourself all the possibilities that they can do to help themselves. And not as a means for telling them what to do, but as a means to reassure yourself that there's many solutions to the problem. It's just not your problem to figure out because that is that individual's learning opportunity. And by being the role model and loving them and supporting them and asking them, that sounds really challenging. What do you think you are going to do? What is your next step? How do you feel about talking to a professional? Do you know anybody else that has gone through a similar situation? So it's really kind of guiding them through the power of your own logical thinking towards getting themselves to think in a logical sense. You're probably going to notice for yourself that you're an expert in handling problems for other people, finding solutions for other people. And it can be really, really easy to look at somebody else and notice their patterns, their behaviors, the things, the spirals that they're in. It can be really clear to say, well, if you just went and did this, then that wouldn't happen anymore. It's very easy to see those things in somebody else. The challenge is, can you see the reflection of them as something within yourself that you are needing to work on? So if you're seeing a lot of people worrying about certain things, that's your mere reflection to ask yourself, what am I so worried about? What am I stuck on up in my mind that I'm not trusting in the universe to guide their way, or I'm not asking for help to move me past my worries, my fears? So really learning to look at ourselves. And also reminding yourself, if it is very easy for you to give somebody else an opinion or some advice, or to sit down and give them a coaching session, right? So that they have some clear indicators of what to do. Or if you're getting a very strong indicator of, well, they just need to do this, this, and this, and then they'll be fine. If you can do that so easily for another, why would it be any different to do it for yourself? So that is also a way that you can flip it around and logically tell yourself that you do have what it takes in order to empower yourself to overcome whatever challenge that you are facing, and to learn to relax into that space by embracing the learning opportunity, reaching out to that higher power, and asking for that guidance. So logical reasoning can only be heard when we are willing to listen. We can't find a solution if we are stuck on the problem. And if we are buried ourselves into the emotions, into our stories, into the stresses, into the worries, we're not listening. We are so hyper focused on what is going wrong or trying to figure it out by the small sense of self, instead of recognizing, ooh, this is an opportunity for me to grow and evolve. This is a beautiful, beautiful lesson to tap into some higher wisdom, to see from another angle, another perspective, to notice where I can really be of service to the light, to that higher aspect of self. And when you're tuned into listening, it is incredible how simple the solution often is. It does come with a lot of humor. It is ourselves that tend to take life so seriously. And the same thing applies to others. If you are advising someone else, teaching someone else, you're parenting someone else, unless you have their attention and unless they are ready to listen, it's falling on deaf ears. So you're wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time, likely getting very frustrated. You might be stepping into that shadow of intolerance because you are feeling that nobody is listening. So it's really becoming aware for yourself as to the timing. Not everybody is here to grow and evolve. Not everybody is going to be a match for each other. And really allowing yourself to share your concepts, your ideas, your wisdom with those who are open and receptive to it. Most importantly, it's learning to use that wisdom and that guidance for ourselves. So we often receive information for ourselves first, and it is very powerful to be the one that is walking the talk. So there's a really good way to look at logical thinking. Are you advising someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, or you have not yet done for yourself? So really looking at the power of leading by example and being a walking demonstration of what can be done in order to help people take their head out of the sand, so to speak, and look up to see the unlimited possibilities that do exist. We're going to move now into the inner alchemy, which is taking the gene key in order to open up that gateway of mental solutions. And we are using the textbook, The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. We're going to pull some extracts from that textbook and branch it out into some areas for contemplation. And this is where we're going to see that shadow of intolerance, the dilemma of reason. So how we create reasons that keep us stuck in our program, moving ourselves into that gift of understanding so that we can free ourselves from that mental entrapment, and moving ourselves to that highest aspect of light, the sooty of forgiveness. So starting with that shadow of intolerance and the dilemma of reasons. And as a mother of three daughters who are now adults, this really reminds me of that teenage daughter stance. And, I had the same one for myself. And I think we've all been there where we just know we are right, or we're not budging from our stance. We have an opinion. We have a preference, we have a comfort zone, we're not in the mood, and our body language, our auric field, everything in us can just scream of that intolerance. So this shadow of intolerance is rooted in the mind's habit of becoming tangled up with human emotions. It is based on the subjective distortion of logic, which only measures those patterns a person wants to see rather than seeing all patterns from both sides of an argument. And I can remember being a teenager and dating certain boys and being attracted because they were a little bit more on the wild side, and convincing myself of, well, how perfect they actually are. That they would never engage in that kind of behavior. They would never cheat on me. They would never do that. And it is such a blinding of what was truly happening, because logically, if someone has done it before, they're likely going to do it again. But because there's emotions attached to that, the blinders go on, and all you see is the story that you are telling yourself in your mind. So when friends come in and says, so and so did this, it was very easy to get mad at those friends because, oh, my boyfriend would never do that. So what became so obvious for everybody else was certainly not in my frame of view because of those emotions. So really looking at where you may tend to only see one side of things and create a viewpoint, and really kind of then close the door from not wanting to see past your part of the argument, the side you have taken, your perspective, your opinion, and noticing, do you have the arms crossed on that? Are you closed off from receiving anything else? Because the general emotional state of humanity is unstable and chaotic, we identify with our emotions and we allow it to define the way we live our life. And marketers know this. They know how to use the power of emotions to get you to want their product, to very quickly buy certain things, to identify with certain things, to create an image around certain things. And it's all through stimulating your emotions. Then our emotions start to tell ourselves a story, and we believe the story. We feed ourselves that story. And if we can't live up to that story, our emotions start to then create all sorts of havoc. So when reacting to our own and others' emotions, we decide that what we feel must be the truth, and our mind agrees with us. So we can really step into the ability to feed any story. And if we are emotionally invested in that, the more you are hooked in, and emotionally affected, the more your mind is going to be convinced that that's the truth. That has to be correct. And it really helps us to identify all unresolved emotional patterns. And what's happening is your mind has created this framework, and it tells you that it is logical. It tells you that that is what is happening, but it was the child's perspective or whatever age you were at when a trauma took root. And however you learned to cope with that became your framework and became your story. So every time that emotion is triggered, the mind brings up that program and says, that's what this is. That is what is happening. So to go back to the example I shared earlier, if you eventually came to realize that your boyfriend was cheating on you, and then you went forward to start dating others, as soon as the behavioral pattern looked familiar to your previous experience, or somebody looks a certain way, or somebody says a certain something that feels to be familiar, the emotions are going to go, he's cheating on me. It's going to bring up that old program. Then the eyes are starting to look for evidence to prove that so and so is cheating. It's going to play through all sorts of things in the mind to create the reasons, the rationalizations of why you're right. And meanwhile, emotionally, you're going to start to become withdrawn from that other person, judgmental, intolerant. And the other person, even if they didn't do something, is going to feel that disconnect and go, whoa, this doesn't feel good to me. And that then creates a lot of barriers within relationships. So a lot of time we forget to communicate. We forget to go back to the logical mind that is stimulating us to ask questions. And not just questions of the other, but to ask questions of ourselves. Why did that bother me? Why did that trigger me? What is this fear that I'm feeling? We forget to ask the energy, to talk to the emotion. And instead, we try to logically explain, well, I'm feeling this because of that. Emotions don't have a logical explanation. They are chemical reactions based on our stories that then stimulate and attach a feeling. So it's really important to not identify by your emotions, but to learn to really embrace them and to use the logic to get to the root of the issue. And if you are somebody who is emotionally undefined in your chart, you're feeling someone else's emotions at 200%. That can create a lot of stories in the mind for that inner child of you to cope with the overwhelming nature of having to feel certain things, and really then asking yourself, is this emotion even mine? A lot of times we pick up energy from others and we assume that it is ours. We get identified by somebody else's moods, by somebody else's energy, by somebody else's day, and then we logically attach a reason to it. And then our feelings tell us, well, that must be true. And we continue to create our own narratives. We have a lot of opinions, judgments, resentments, and insecurities that we then transmute into, well, this has to be right. I'm certain that they are doing this. Did you know that so and so did that? But the truth is, we don't know how anyone else is feeling. We don't know what their thoughts are. We don't know what their stories are. We don't know the reactions inside their body. We only know our own. And it is our own journey to really use our logic to do our own healing work, to then question, why did that trigger me? Coming to that place of neutrality where you can really become the loving parent the observer of what is going on and not feel so overwhelmed. We've been taught to choose a side. So when we're in that shadow of intolerance, it's got to be this or that. Nothing else exists. So we choose this or that. We choose our stance in that. We forget that there's all these other possibilities that exist. Our fear becomes projected onto other people. And a lot of times we take a defensive and sometimes an offensive mental position. So I'm right, you're wrong. These are my reasons for why I am right. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to block you out. I'm going to go get other people to side with me. Right? So we have all these different ways of protecting our hurt, frightened, scared inner child. And it's only when we become the parenting thought, we tap into the wise one, that we can then logically work with that hurt inner child to get to the root of the problem, to unravel the story that we have created within our mind, to logically dissect it, to start to look from multiple perspectives, and then help ourselves to grow up by becoming more emotionally and spiritually mature. And that does take a lot of practice. It is an art of being very mindful and also realizing that our parents are also hurt, wounded children that just happen to look like parents. So society is full of that. We are learning how to be more emotionally mature. We have to logically look at our levels of growth and not to feel like we are way above somebody else, but to just constantly come back into doing our own work, looking at our own traumas, our own shutdowns. Every time we close the heart or we're afraid to let somebody else in, someone else's emotion in, someone's feelings in, someone's truth as they know it in, that is our work to do within the self. So we are driven by an endless need to examine patterns and resolve questions. And we use our mind as a means to seek an end to the pressure. We want to figure it out. Why did they behave that way? Why did they do that? Yet, true understanding cannot come from the mind. Your mind cannot rationalize because it is not in someone else's head and it does not have somebody else's stories. It has not lived their experience. It has not created their personal program. So it cannot come to an understanding. You can't use your mind to figure out you. It is your body's cellular wisdom that holds the clues and brings you into that higher intelligence that can guide you beyond the trauma, beyond the hurt, beyond the emotions to tap into the source of that. So we're learning not to use the mind to lead the way, to not be that decision maker, but to be the observer of life. The shadow of intolerance has two sides to it. So in a repressive state, this is apathic. So it is really feeling a lack of energy. This is a mental lethargy. The mind is literally given up trying to understand anything. Just, doesn't matter, whatever. I don't know. Just is what it is. And it's a state of also believing yourself to be less intelligent than another. And again, going back to that undefined ajna center, you're not designed to retain information. But when we go into school systems and we're waiting on the teacher to call our name, and you're not designed to retain information, even though you know it, it's in your cells, you know it, there can be such a fear of, oh my God, I'm going to be called on in class. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. People are going to laugh at me. I'm going to be called stupid. I'm going to be made to feel dumb. I'm going to get this report card that has a failing grade because I panic and I can't remember when I go sit to do a test. That is where a lot of times we get those attitudes of, oh, I don't care. I'm just stupid. I'm not going to learn. It doesn't matter to me. So we put up those defenses instead of really recognizing you're paralyzed by fear. It's not that you don't know, you have a fear of, I don't know what to say in this moment. But yet it's in you and guarantee you know exactly where to find it. You know the textbook, you know the resource. If you were given the time, you could access the information. If it wasn't under pressure, you could probably breathe into yourself and relax to, oh, yeah, this is what it is. And a good example for that is when you're really interested in a subject, it's easy to remember. When you're not really engaged in it, it's just kind of in and out one ear. So it's not that you don't have the ability to be intelligent, it's that you learn in a different way and you're designed in a different way. But we have been taught by society to place ourselves in terms of intellect, which is based on knowledge, but knowledge is an accumulation of somebody else's opinion. Somebody's opinion wrote that book that they then teach and is absorbed by the mind. That is all opinion. What lies beyond opinion? What other areas is there to explore? There is an afraid to assume responsibility for oneself, decisions, and actions. So I don't want to make a choice because then I might be wrong. And a lot of times, going back to that undefined emotional center again, if you're feeling someone else's emotions at 200%, there is a legitimate fear of making a decision and then having to feel someone else's emotional reaction if it's the wrong one. So again, that inner child goes, okay, I'm not going to make the decisions because I don't want to feel that. What do you want? You tell me what to do. I just want a magic 8 ball so that someone gives me the instructions and I don't have to figure it out. Just give me a step-by-step manual. Let me know what you want. Those are all signs of no longer thinking for yourself. And then finding it very difficult to self-motivate, right? It's almost the mind talk of like, why even bother? Why should I try? I'm just going to be wrong. Someone's just going to laugh at me. It's just going to be discounted, right? So those are all ways that we use our mind to create reasons to keep us stuck in our patterns. On the other side of that is the reactive nature, which is nitpicking. So this is now external from self. And this is where the mind is literally ruling someone's life and it projects itself out. It wants answers, so it's questioning everything. It'll question everything you're doing. It will find fault in the smallest little details. And it is really looking for a hole in your opinion or a hole in your stance. And it's really trying to find a sense of security within themselves. So when your argument falls flat or when it finds a hole in something or where it doesn't get an answer that feels to then satisfy their curiosity or their question, it can become very angry. It starts to blame themselves for either not figuring it out or it blames someone else for, not feeling at peace, not getting the information that it needs to. So it's always very, very quick to criticize. This might be the individual that claims to be the know-it-all and is nitpicking at you for, you don't know that? How stupid are you? What grade did you get? Really? So it's noticing how by hurting the other. It's trying to fill itself up, but it's not filling itself up because it's never enough. It's never good enough in that energy. It is really about just venting that frustration that is inside, that is lacking a sense of safety and security in the world, and it's not receiving the answers that it believes it needs in order to feel safe. We're going to move now into the gift of understanding, and this is where we really see our auric field, how much we are so much more than just this physical body. We have our physical body, we have our astral, which is our emotional body, and then we have our mental body. So whenever we're stuck in our mind and our emotions are feeding the mind, we can't get past that into what is known as the casual or the soul body, the subtle layers of our expansion. So we keep ourselves really condensed. We keep ourselves in our same program. We keep ourselves in the same patterns of behavior. And it's this ping pong of feeding the emotions, feeding the stories, feeding the emotions, feeding the stories. The physical body pays the price. So it's only when we learn to relax the mind and relax the body that that spirit rises up, the soul rises up. So we often hear of the mind body spirit connection, and that's what it is opening up more and more layers of you. So when we come out of trying to use the mind to do the thinking, and we use the mind to come in through the third eye to see from a bigger perspective, to use logic in terms of, well, does this make sense? What else is there? What is this emotion teaching me? What is this feeling teaching me? What is this sensation in my body teaching me? Always trying to learn more and more about oneself and how your body's communicating to you. Then we start to expand into the higher emotions and the higher mind. And eventually, there's the possibility to tap into divine will, the ultimate source. So we are forever pulsing outwards, but our mind will keep us so stuck in that. The gift of understanding has nothing whatsoever to do with knowledge. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter how much you have learned and acquired. Knowledge is what your mind thinks it needs in order to take away its permanent feeling of unease. True understanding, it lies outside the domain of the mind. It arises from your whole being. Your wisdom is inside you. It is within every cell of your body. The little nucleus, the light that goes, oh, it's the aha moments. Is found within quietness. It's found within calm. It's found in joy and inspiration and creativity and play, which is why a child learns so quickly in those first 5 years. The more it gets to play and the more it gets to try and the more it gets to discover, and when it's given the freedom to do that, it just keeps feeding wisdom into itself and allowing the wisdom to emerge. It's only when the child gets faced with, don't do that, that's not right, this is how you learn, this is the way it is, that starts to suppress the child going outside of itself to figuring out the program of, well, when I believe this and I do that, I get this. So we all have that program. Most children go to school now before the age of 5. They're already put into the boxes of learning to behave in certain ways in order to acquire something, or learning to compare themselves to their classmates, learning to value themselves based on the parent, the teacher, the community, the feedback from others, all other people's opinions, not wisdom. Wisdom is inside. You came into this world with everything you need to be the highest version of you, and only you can unleash your gifts out into the world. There's only one you. You have the only thumbprint that is you. But we're made to believe that we have to be something, but it's only to fit the narrative of what the world wants you to be, the role and the pattern they have decided you should fit into. But you are so much more. So the more we learn to break away from our mindset, we literally purge ourselves from everything we've ever been taught. And you give yourself permission to learn again, to play again, to figure out who are you by following your joy, by tapping into the wisdom, by building that relationship with yourself. Loving yourself, nurturing yourself, believing in yourself, encouraging yourself, being curious, asking questions, learning about so many different things, having different experiences, not getting stuck in an opinion, but always wanting to learn more, wanting to see another angle, wanting to discover something else, asking other people questions because of having an honest inquiry to get to know them. The gift of understanding is the only answer that will satisfy a person's dissatisfaction. And it must come about through the exhaustion of your mind rather than the only way. So a lot of times it's when we are so mentally exhausted that we then finally surrender and we're ready to listen. And we're learning to relax our mind before exhausting the mind. But a lot of us have that monkey mind. We try to figure it all out. We play our stories over and over and over again, trying to find the solution. A lot of times we go to sleep at night. You're out of the way. So you might wake up in the morning with, oh, that's how I do it. So the mind has to surrender. When you look logically at all angles of any concept, you begin to realize that nothing can ultimately be proven through logic because logic can always be used to prove the opposite side. If you only think in terms of black and white, this or that, there's logic for this, there's logic for that, there's logic for black, there's logic for white. Logic contradicts itself. When you finally see this, your whole being lightens because you realize once and for all that the mind is of no use for resolving anything of real importance. This in turn releases the mind to do what it loves best, to research, communicate, and play. So think of that like a ping pong. If you're just ping ponging back and forth, this side or that side, and you look at the world that has chosen a this side or a that side, and how big that divide is in the middle, what if you learn to lessen the gap, that divide within yourself, by bringing both sides together to see what's in the in-between? That's called taking the third road, taking the middle path, the path of the mystic. It's not this or that. There's more to the story. There's always another perspective. There's always another angle. There's always something else to learn. There's always something new to discover. We live in a world that is feeling to be very chaotic, but yet the laws of the universe say it's in perfect harmony. So if there's disharmony within ourselves, it's because we're not in alignment with trusting in the universe's organic nature. We are always in a state of change. So, how can we believe that things are constant? It's always evolving. We're always growing. You're not the same person today that you were yesterday. You're not the same person today that you will be tomorrow. So it's allowing yourself the freedom to release the hold of the mind, to move into understanding, allowing for a new understanding to constantly arise within you, to be so relaxed that those little light bulbs within your cells are constantly going off as you are discovering more and more and more and more and more. There is no way in our lifetime we could possibly understand our world. It is that beautiful. There's that much to be curious about. And how wonderful it is to always be in a state of learning where you don't have to just study one thing. You can allow yourself to just say, what am I here to learn today? Take me on a journey. Show me what it is that is for my highest good. Go back to being that child, that return to your own innocence in order to really step outside the perimeters of our own self-created mental jail. The gift of understanding carries within it the seed intention to solve problems of intolerance and division in the world. So understanding teaches us to narrow the gap, to be more understanding of each other, to be more tolerant of each other, to listen, to want to know someone else's perspective, and to not judge it as right or wrong, but just to listen. You don't have to agree with it, but there's no harm in allowing someone to express themselves freely and to be given the space to do so without opinion, without judgment, but just to be who they are in that moment as you allow yourself to be who you are in that moment. So through acceptance of ourself and others, we reach a state of understanding. And when we're in understanding, we no longer have a need to defend one's own viewpoint. So if someone's attacking you and you feel this defensiveness of, well, you have to prove something, well, you're in the shadow. You're in the shadow of intolerance. You're intolerant with yourself. You're intolerant with the other. You have to have reasons to justify why you're doing something, why you're behaving in a certain way. When you understand who you are and you trust that your decision and actions are coming from higher guidance, there's no need to prove anything. There's no need to defend yourself. There's no need to get the other person to understand you. What matters is that you understand yourself. It moves to be in service to the world. So it's not worrying about just trying to protect the little self. It understands that it's part of a greater network, a greater whole. So it moves into helping other people move past their own intolerance and to heal that division, to open up the dialogues, communication, forgiveness, all those virtues that come into that. Being of service to the world, being a healer in that. And it's the ability to see the underlying patterns of life and using that to understand others better. And this is where you can use your ability to see somebody else's behavioral patterns, how they're self-sabotaging, how they may refuse to look at something that is right there, how the not using common sense arises, and to see that as those underdeveloped aspects of self, the parts that are afraid, the parts holding trauma, the parts holding wounds, the parts that need loving guidance. They need understanding. They need the parenting thought. They need the self-empowerment through their own self-actualization. That is where you can really be of service. So it becomes curious and it asks them questions, and it's really about seeking to understand rather than to be understood. It doesn't matter any longer if somebody understands you, your point of view, where you're coming from. You know who you are. You don't need anybody else to validate that for you because you know who you are. So now you're seeking to understand someone else, to have that commonality, that openness, to maybe break through some of those mental barriers by knowing you're safe enough to have a conversation without being defensive, without proving your position, without arguing your side, without enforcing an opinion, but just to open up the space to want to understand one another. And this brings us to the ultimate sudi of forgiveness, the highest light aspect, that openness of the heart, the mind, the connection to all things. Forgiveness is born out of understanding, and it is the pathway of love. Forgiveness allows the truth behind all form to be seen. Rather, further than that, it allows one to see through and thus become one with truth. Forgiveness is the thunderbolt that is released when a being attains Christ consciousness. And I very purposely put in that last little statement of Christ consciousness because we are in the gate of mental solutions. And for myself, being raised in the church, there is a framework of opinion right there. And in my own healing journey, I'm noticing that there is an energetic story, an attachment to certain words because of a conditioning belief system. And when you're walking the path of a mystic, you're looking at all religions, you're looking at all history, all cultural beliefs, and you are moving them into a place of acceptance to see them for what they truly are. So it's using the power of the mind to look beyond. And when you look at the image of Christ, you'll see the halo in behind. Well, Christ, Jesus, was a man who walked the earth, no different from you and I, had a human experience. The soul had a higher purpose. The soul reached a greater enlightenment, which is that halo in behind. It is the symbolism of being the bridge, of showing humanity the way of love and bridging us from this world into that possibility. So opening up the mind to a higher perspective. And of course, there's so much more to know in that. I'm just learning in my own discovery to see beyond the stories and see beyond the patterns and see beyond the perspectives and to really challenge the reactions to words, to energies, to emotions, to feelings, the insecurities of having to prove something, and really just being curious. Not being afraid to play, not being afraid to ask questions, and most importantly, asking the questions for yourself. Why do I believe that? Why do I feel so strongly about that? Why did that bother me? Learning to parent that inner child. And we all have our work to do. We're all at different stages within this beautiful journey of life. And that is where the gift of understanding really comes into play. It's allowing each other space, sending each other love and encouragement, and really knowing that we're here to each blossom and bloom in our own time and in our own pace. And it's all as beautifully designed as it's meant to be. So I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear your aha moments. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Feel free to use that comment section below to share with one another. And I look forward to moving into the very last gate with you within Leo season. That is going to bring us into the whole energy of commitment. So knowing what you are committing to. So we are in the pathway of moving forward in that directional alignment. That was your gate before this one, mental solutions. So before we can move forward, we have to examine our mindsets. We have to examine our belief system and what keeps you trapped in the same stories. Once you are clear on that, then it's looking at now how can you commit to only saying yes to those things that are of your highest good. So I look forward to continuing our journey through Leo season together, and I will see you in the next recording. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.